Hello and very warm welcome. Today we will be starting with a new topic of Indian economy that is related to national income. Under national income, what we will do first, we will be taking the definition of GDP and we will try to understand the associated concept of GDP, right? So if we talk about gross domestic product, that is also known as GDP, the definition of GDP says the value of final goods and services, total value of final goods and services produced in a domestic territory of an economy, produced in a domestic territory of an economy over a period of financial year, over a period of a financial year, right? Now this is the definition of gross domestic product. Now we will try to understand the terms present in this definition so that we can understand the associated concept. Now, when we say gross domestic product, it is talking about the value of final goods and services. Why value? See, we want to understand how much goods and services have been produced in the economy, right? So we can understand in their absolute quantity also, in terms of their absolute quantity. For example, we can understand it like this: it is 10 million tons of wheat, or maybe 100 million tons of rice, right? So in this particular absolute quantity also we can understand that how much goods have been produced, and for that matter how much services have been produced. But when we attach value of these commodities, then we get the value of production in terms of rupees, in terms of dollars, so that we can compare that how much contribution is coming from agriculture, how much contribution is coming from for example this industrial sector, or how much contribution is coming from the services sector in GDP. That is how we calculate the value of it and not the absolute quantity. We are more interested in calculating the value of production and not the absolute quantity of the production. This is one thing that we can understand here. Now it is related to final goods and services. So let's understand what exactly final goods and services are. For example, if I want to classify goods and services, there can be n number of classification, but we can take broadly capital goods and consumer goods. So if I am taking capital goods and consumer goods here, let's understand capital goods and consumer goods. When we say capital good and consumer good, capital goods are those goods which are used for further production of goods and services. So further production of goods and services, right? This is capital good. Now here, when we talk about consumer good, it is not used for any further production. It is rather used for self-consumption. Now, what are the examples of it? For example, this particular board, this particular screen is being used for production of educational services. So this becomes what? A capital good, right? This particular marker or stylus is being used for production of educational services. So it becomes what? A capital good. But for example, for a student who is consuming this lecture, who is listening to this information, then for that particular student, it becomes what? It becomes a consumer service, right? You are accepting this information. You are not involved in further production of any particular service with the help of this, right? So that is consumer good. For example, the kind of food that we eat is related to consumer good. The kind of clothes, the kind of footwear that we use, that is related to what? Consumer good. Now I will take an example and we will try to understand how capital good is deviating from the consumer good. Let's take an example of a car. So there is a car, right? This particular car you have purchased, and now this particular car you are using to, for example, to go to college or to go to maybe your workplace, etc. So college, workplace, etc., or maybe for any outing, trip, etc. So you are going those places for your own satisfaction. So for your own satisfaction, you are making use of this particular car. So that's why this car becomes what? This consumer good, right? But when you are using this particular car for taxi services, to provide taxi services, for example, Ola, Uber, Rapido, or any, in general, any taxi service, that means you are using this particular commodity for further production of service. When you are using this particular commodity for further production of services, it becomes what? It becomes capital good. So same car can be used as a capital good, can also be used as a consumer good. I hope the distinction between capital good and consumer good is clear. Now let's understand there is one more category that is we are concerned with, that is known as what? Intermediate goods. Now what do we mean by intermediate goods? Intermediate goods are those goods which get exhausted, which get completely exhausted, which get completely exhausted during the process of production. So during production process, for example, in this particular car, the fuel that you are using is an example of what? Intermediate goods, because this particular fuel will be consumed by this particular taxi services, and for this particular taxi services, this fuel will get consumed. So it is known as what? Intermediate goods. Now when we are talking about GDP, see the total value of final goods and services. So final goods and services means these intermediate goods are not being used for GDP calculation. So intermediate goods are not calculated for, not included in GDP calculation, not included in GDP calculation. And when we say final goods and services, this capital goods are also final goods and services, this consumer goods are also final goods and services, right? So intermediate goods are not to be taken. There are other examples of goods or other classification, for example, this Giffen goods, Veblen goods, etc. We are not going into the details of it because those goods are related to exceptions of law of demand, right? So we are not going into those details. For us, this particular distinction is more than enough, right? When we will study those topics, then we will see those kind of classification also. Now final goods and services. Produce, you know, what do we mean by production? Production means converting raw material into finished goods. So what is production? Converting inputs into, or arranging inputs and converting it into an output, or you can say raw materials, converting raw materials into finished goods, converting raw materials into what? Finished goods, right? This is what do we mean by production, right? In a domestic territory of an economy. Now let's understand what is domestic territory. So to understand domestic territory, this particular domestic territory includes this land boundary, right? So how much land area that we are having is our domestic territory. For example, this roughly around is 32 lakh square kilometer that we talk about, 32 lakh square kilometer roughly, that is related to what? That is related to our land boundary. Also sea boundary, right? Sea boundary means the area that is from the coastal area, how much water body that is in our control. So sea boundary up to 12 nautical miles, 12 nmi, right? This is part of domestic territory. Also, if we talk about this airlines and shipping companies, or shipping firms which are headquartered in a country, I will explain this with an example. Headquartered in a country. For example, this Indigo is having headquarters in India, and suppose Indigo is flying from London to New York. So in this particular journey from London to New York, Indigo is generating some value out of its airline services, right? So Indigo is providing an airline service from London to New York, and it is generating some value in it. but that value will be calculated under India's GDP. Why? Because Indigo is having its headquarter in India, right? So for airlines and shipping, because it is they are involved in this global activity from one place to another place, so they are generating value even outside the domestic territory of a country where they are headquartered. But whatever business they are carrying out in other parts of the world also, that business will be added into India's GDP, right? So it is related to airlines and shipping industry. Fourth, we can talk about this oil and gas rigs. So oil and gas exploration firms, right? Oil and gas exploration firms, if they are performing any exploration in international water, if exploration is being performed in international water, then they will be counted under the company, under the country, under the GDP of the country where they are being headquartered. So again, the concept of headquarter will come, but here you have to keep in mind that it is related to international water. If they are carrying out exploration in the domestic territory, because up to 12 nautical miles, so if they are going into the water body of other country, then it will be counted under the GDP of that country. But when it is in international water, then we will take into the consideration of headquarter. Other than that, you can talk about this consulates and embassies. So embassies and consulates. Embassies and consulates. So consulates are the branches of embassies only, right? So for example, India is having its embassy in Afghanistan, or also India is having its consulates in Afghanistan. So whatever value of goods and services being produced in embassies and consulates, they will also be counted under the territory of that particular country. So for example, if India is having its embassy in US, and whatever goods and value of goods and services being produced there, that will also be counted under India's GDP, right? So this is about the domestic territory of any particular country. So I hope we have understood from the definition, this is domestic territory. Now what is economy? Economy is related to a particular entity, right? A particular entity. For example, economy may be of a country, maybe of a state, right? Maybe of a city, right? Any local region, right? So any local region. When you apply the principles of economics to any particular entity, we say it is economy. That's why you will see we say Indian economy, we say British economy, we say economy of US, right? So territory will be attached, right? Economy of Delhi, economy of Mumbai, economy of Maharashtra, economy of Punjab, economy of Haryana, right? Economy of northern parts of India, economy of southern parts of India. So a particular entity to be attached, that is economy, right? And here we are talking about domestic territory of India, domestic territory of a country, that's why Indian economy, right? Over a period of a financial year. Now let's understand what exactly the financial year is. What exactly the financial year is, right? Now to understand financial year, see, it's a very easy concept, but one more concept is associated with this financial year. Financial year starts from 1st of April and ends on 31st of March, right? So for example, if I say it is financial year 2025-2026, then it will start from 1st of April 2025 and it will end on 31st of March 2026. This is financial year. But what we do exactly, this financial year is divided into 4 quarters. 4 quarters. For example, this quarter 1, quarter 2, quarter 3, quarter 4. Quarter 1 will start from April, May and June. Then quarter 2 will start from July, August and September, and quarter 3 will start from October, November and December, and quarter 4 will start from January, February and March. These are 4 quarters, right? But you have to understand that we have started this quarterly estimates of GDP or quarterly estimates of GDP in India, quarterly estimates of GDP in India, we started after 1996. So this started 1996 onwards. This started 1996 onwards. Why we are focusing on this particular information? Because during COVID period, it was said that India is having its first technical recession. India is having its first technical recession. Now, what do we mean by this? When we say India is having its first technical recession, what is the definition of technical recession? Technical recession says when GDP growth is negative, when GDP growth is negative for two successive quarters, two successive quarters. What does it mean? See, when we say for two successive quarters, the GDP growth should be negative. That means we should have quarterly estimates of GDP. Otherwise, we will not be able to say whether for two successive quarters we are having negative GDP growth or not. So that means GDP growth to be negative for two successive quarters, we should have quarterly estimates of GDP. So India had seen recession in the past. Before 1991, we had recession so many times. But those recessions are based on annual calculation of GDP. So when our annual GDP growth became negative, we used to say this is the recession year for us. But when we talk about technical recession, it says two successive quarters when it is seen negative GDP growth, then it is a technical recession. That's why technical recession is different from this particular recession. That doesn't mean when you see this particular information, that doesn't mean before COVID we did not have any recession period in India. We had recession in the past, annual recession, not this technical recession or based on the quarterly estimates of GDP. So I hope you have understood the definition of GDP. And there are many more concepts associated with it, for example, depreciation and with respect to net factor income from abroad, etc., net indirect tax, that we will see in the next video, right? So thank you very much. Take care. Bye-bye.